Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Sometimes when playing Dungeons & Dragons, or any other type of tabletop RPG, the GM might bring in a character to join the party if they need some help, or even for narrative purposes, known as DMPCs. This can usually work if the character isn't overpowered and just there for a little while. Though sometimes, some DMs use this to self-insert, railroad, or just try to make the story about them. That, unfortunately, is the case in this next D&D horror story. But first, this is the like ham sandwich. I really want to eat this sandwich, but I can't until this video gets 200 likes. So please like the video, because I really want to eat this sandwich. Though with that out of the way, let's hop right into the story. The Party from Hell, by Reddit user The Chanja Raj. This was almost nearly 10 years ago, so some in-game story details may be a little foggy. Here's hoping this story can entertain, if not educate a little. Names are changed, etc, etc. I don't write things too graphically, but there is some mention of child abuse, unfortunately. The cast. Me, myself playing a halfling fighter. At the time, the only girl for most of the run of it. Was also new to D&D, but not role-playing, and was happy to find a group willing to take me in at my local community college. London, half-elf ranger. Pleasant dude, but seemed like he was allergic to bathing. He had a stench that could peel paint off a tank in space. Brony, elf paladin. A big guy who liked to draw, especially My Little Pony, which was the style at the time. Notorious for going on long-ass tangents, and drawing women with astronomically large tits. Mitch, human scion. 3.5e homebrew or something. Soft-spoken guy who always seemed to have his brain on somewhere else. At the time, we just called him a flake. Now the proper term for it is simp. He had the books on a hard drive and would sometimes leave the game to help random girls move, leaving us without resources. Other times, he'd bring totally disinterested girls to play without any explanation of what the game was. Don't bring your new crushes to a long-running game, folks, especially if they've never played before. Barbarian, half-orc barbarian. Still my friend to this day. Just a guy who wanted to play D&D. A sweetheart, if not a little oblivious to how awful things got. Big Sexy, the DM. Big Sexy was at first glance a little different from how you would picture a cringe DM from hell. He was kind of an enigma with age. The way he spoke about himself and his life experiences made him sound like a man in his 40s, if not mid-30s. Apparently, according to him, he was either divorced or just had a baby mama, and had daughters. He was also apparently, quote, in the Yakuza, but I have a really hard time believing that. He practiced hygiene and was, on first glance, well-spoken. The fedora was a red flag, but in his defense, he wore a fedora with a fitted vest, shirt, and pants. Like, it matched and didn't look like a colorblind fashion disaster. He looked super out of time, sure, but I chalked that up to being kinda quirky. At first, it was a dream come true. A large group of nerds who I could share interests with and finally try this game. Amazing. It started out fun and lighthearted. It was a group of 12 plus that would switch in and out. Never join a group of more than 5 or 6. That's just begging for overcrowding problems. Since I was new and we had such a huge party with all the roles filled, I decided to play a character dubbed Hilda Bender, a halfling fighter and gigolo. He was mostly there to be comedic relief, a coward, a lech, and a party animal. After some disagreements between DM, other players, and other issues I don't exactly remember, the DM decided to add a new element to the story that basically sent us back in time into level 1. All with a shaved down cast of like 5. The story was basically sort of rebooted and became a more proper adventure you'd expect. Instead of just goofing around, there were dungeons to clear, towns to visit, goals, so on. Another huge difference was made with my character. The DM had a terrible time remembering that Hilda was a man. Not sure how, I even drew him, and there was plenty of time to mentally establish I wasn't playing a woman. So, out of frustration, after the millionth she was tossed their way, I asked, quote, "Do you want me to just play as a woman?" He responded, "Yes, please." Here was the first red flag. After Hilda became Hilda with the time change, that is where everything started to change. I mean, it's not that hard to refer to a character's gender if it doesn't match the player. If anything, this just shows the mental fortitude of this DM. which I'm sure we will find out. We started playing at my grandparents' place after the time change. They had a large basement. I was living with them at the time, and they were happy to see me socializing. It was also more private than playing at the community college, so the guys started whipping out their phones and laptops way more often. Not the biggest offense in the world. I get it, I get distracted too. But they were looking up dating sites to rate women. If they weren't judging potential dates, they were looking at porn and kinda just sharing it with each other. Look, we all have needs, but we're here to play a game. I'd rather not have the game be delayed because a bunch of nerds decided to roll the dice under the table. Most of my pleas went unyielded until the DM decided it was time to play. And even then, the pictures were still up and very visible, just not being ogled like a cartoon. Food etiquette was not a thing. I try to be a good host when I have people over. I make sure they have something to eat, drink, and are comfortable, etc. So I would go up to the kitchen, cook a cheap pizza, bring it down, go back upstairs to get drinks, come back with drinks, and the pizza was all gone. Okay, time to make another. Go all the way back upstairs, cook another, go back downstairs, and they descend like locusts. A lot of my memories playing with this group are accompanied by a growling stomach and a crub-laden mess. They'd end up being halfway through combat too, leaving me out of the fray once I got my turn. Why does social acceptability seem to just fly over some people's heads? Why would they think it's okay to just look at porn and leave it up on the screen, especially in OP's grandma's house? And then to not appreciate the snacks that OP is providing by not even saving her any. It's almost like manners is something they were never taught. I mean, I can understand being hungry, but leave some for the person who provided the food. Big Sexy's attitude towards women started to really surface once out of the open of the college. Some of this started with things he allowed the players to just kind of have. Lady NPCs were almost always sexy lamps to just be given to the players. London's Ranger couldn't go anywhere without his sexy, busty, obedient succubine girlfriend, wife, whatever. Apparently she was a whole thing in the original game. He had won her over with something, and even in a damn time reset, she still felt bound to be with him, and vice versa. There was no arc about them remembering each other or falling back in love. Just kinda status quo to the rescue. Don't wanna think too hard. Their love was legit, so her succubi ways didn't hurt him. Or the lawful good paladin played by Brony. Just heroic, blessed by the one god who was all just a god of goodness. Oh, we'll get there, don't worry. He needed a girl too, so he got a 14-year-old sex slave healer. So I was willing to let the stupid succubi thing go, but this is goddamn gross. I argued until I was blue in the face how that was both disgusting to deal with as a player, as well as not lawful good. I yelled at a man who supposedly had daughters why a grown man having a child concubine was not good. His argument? Quote, "Well, in medieval times, it was common for men to marry much younger, so it's lawful." This wasn't medieval England / France / anywhere on this earth. Entirely different world. This world's history does not have to apply to this fantasy game. Big Sexy, by having this blank slate and filling it with the notion that child slavery is not just a thing, but a thing that is legally and culturally smiled upon by the god of all that is good, has just basically said that this was okay. There was no cynicism, no sarcasm, just flat out, quote, "Well, it's legally good because people accept it." I was brushed aside as being too sensitive and needing to understand history more. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we have reached peak Neckbeard. I wish I had booted them out after this. I wish I'd stopped playing. But I was still a kid, lacking life experience, and never heard of the adage of no D&D is better than bad D&D. Mitch needed a sexy lamp too. Heaven forbid there be a player without a love interest. At this point, I had volunteered to voice the lady NPCs for him. I enjoy doing voices, and it put a damper on every woman having a lilting Irish falsetto, so bonus points. Another bonus to me being given the keys to NPCs was being able to steer things away from just sexy woman of some sort of flavor to be won over. Sometimes they would already be married, in a relationship, gay, or just plain not interested. That wasn't to say that there wouldn't be some women interested. Mitch had his pick, and one of them was a barmaid. Feisty, stood up for herself, and didn't exactly let people make a fool of herself. She expected a commitment and someone she wouldn't have to mother. She wasn't exactly trying to marry up either. Her family ran a chain of bars that brought in quite a bit of coin. She was dubbed a nag by the party because she wanted him to at least drop by and assure her he was safe. Now then, a bit of world building. The world we played in had one god, and the god was the god of everything except evil. There was a huge emphasis on how they were good. They were basically Christianity God, and like in Christianity, God had one son. Introducing Alistar, the DMPC Paladin, because this game wasn't already on a very slippery slope. Despite our party being pretty damn competent, all things considered, with how liberally Big Sexy gave out levels, feats, magic items, and money, we needed the literal Son of God. Alistar had everything maxed and then some. He was sought after by people far and wide for his wisdom. He could easily lift up the side of a house all by himself, and he was always just and right. He was nimble and smart, and healthy and good-looking beyond compare. Men wanted to be him, women wanted to be with him, and I wanted to die. This guy got saddled with us because apparently our OP party wasn't safe by ourselves from the bandits and monsters we made easy work out of. Off he went with our party without even being asked. A cycle began that drained whatever joy there was out of combat. A big foe would appear, party would get ready to fight, and Alistar would charge into action and end it in one move. So he'd do everything and leave us with our thumbs up our asses. All the people loved him, except Hilda, my character. Hilda had changed quite a bit since being reset, and instead of a lecherous coward, she was a tough-as-nail scrapper. She loved a good fight, and being yanked around by this guy only to have him protect her from something she didn't need help with just enraged her. Above all that, he was self-important, self-righteous, and would go on long dramatic speeches that would put her to sleep. That may have been some projecting on my part, I admit, but I don't think this was wholly out of character or wrong. She would say, quote, "We don't need you. If you're so strong, why don't we save the world over here and you go save the world somewhere else?" A notion that was scoffed off by him. Feelings were made obviously clear by me and the tired glazed eyes of the players, but Alistar was here like a bad rash. Somewhere along the way, the group had to get something from the Amazons. The Amazons who were clearly 100% evil because they were atheists and hated men. Okay. The Amazons got smote to hell, and we got 4 converted young Amazonian women. 4 more intended prizes for the guys. 4 more women for me to play, now with character sheets. So I could have and should have said no more, or refused to play the NPCs. But I was intrigued at the concept of these women and making personalities and giving them different arcs. And yeah, no, that was going to be ignored. I don't remember 3 out of the 4 of them, sorry. But there's one that sticks out in my mind. One of the Amazonians was basically adopted by Alistar, taught the Paragon ways, and became a paladin herself. I played her as this battle-hardened woman who was also curious about this new world she was experiencing. That's when she and Barbarian forged a genuine romance. It wasn't planned or anything. They had gotten stuck somewhere for basically a year. Her, Barbarian, and some other people. But the two liked each other's battle systems and would spar, then talk about their common goals in life. Barbarian was a half-orc from a far-off land, in search of wisdom to bring home someday. She was also in a state of wanting to learn all the new things, and to discover herself. It was a slow burn, but the two would help each other in combat, joke, spar, and explore the town together. Big Sexy didn't like that. Alistar didn't like that. Alistar all of a sudden got very paranoid about this half-orc that he had already spent lots of time with, now that he was holding hands with his adult ward daughter with a greatsword. Alistar demanded to know his intentions and declare that he couldn't taint his girl like that. Gross. He went on, casting Detect Evil, Detect Alignment, Zone of Truth, all of these tests to declare him as evil. Why? Quote, "He's a half-orc, and orcs are evil." Now, on first glance, this could have been an interesting turn. The all-righteous paladin being a raging bigot, a crack in his morality. All better ideas with a better writer. This was just Big Sexy not being happy with the pretty Amazon girl making kissy faces with an orc. So, D&D Jesus is racist apparently? Barbarian, a very shy dude in real life, after all these accusations and tests, just shyly brought out his character sheet and pointed to his alignment. Quote, "I'm chaotic good." Barbarian the character was indeed very good. He didn't hurt people unless they started it, and while he didn't understand all of the laws or even like them, he abided until something was genuinely off-putting or wrong. He went out of his way to help people with jobs across town. And so, after all the tests, and the magic even saying he was good, he was still not good enough for his little girl. He forbade him from seeing the Amazon. The two didn't listen for a while, going behind his back because, consenting adults. All until Alistar basically banished her to some far-off mountain to hone her skills, throwing her out of the game until further notice. She bade goodbye to Barbarian, saying it wasn't goodbye, just until they met again. A goodbye that genuinely rang sad. Hilda wasn't excluded from the fun romance shenanigans either. She, as a character, was a bruiser. She wasn't fancy or feminine. She had no interest in long-term romances, and the romance she was interested in was with women. In a world full of factory-made ladies, you'd think that this would be no problem for her. Ha, nope. After a while, she started getting prophetic dreams. That was already weird considering she was pretty anti-theist. But she would get dreams from Paragon, saying she would be responsible for saving the halfling race. That in the future, the halflings would be eradicated. That's a pretty big order, but Hilda is a heroic type and has fought things 5 times as big as her. She was up to the challenge. She wanted to prove herself to her hometown, where she was giving an ultimatum years back to either lady up and marry a rich boy, or join the army. She walked into the recruitment tent backwards, flipping her parents off. That was a big thing for her. The solution? Quote, "You must marry Alistar." Nope.jpg. So, DM had a crush on OP that he wanted to play out in game. That's total normal healthy behavior. Hilda would do a lot of gross awful things. She had been covered in blood, mud, drank out of a half-orc's shoe, but she wouldn't do that. Hell, if it had been any other man, sure. A loveless, touchless marriage, as a last resort maybe. But Alistar? Oh, hell no. So being stubborn, she tried to find every way out of this. There had to be other solutions. Other ways to protect the halfling race. She studied and researched, but the dreams persisted, insisting she had to bear Alistar's child. Out of game, Big Sexy was also persisting me, insisting they'd be such a good match for each other. She just needs to give him a chance. That so much was riding on this, blah blah blah. And between the in and out of game experience, I cracked. Fine, so Hilda, sadly, married Alistar. Fine, keep it on paper, leave me alone. When the time comes, give me a turkey baster. Ah, but it's not allowed like that. They had to go on a honeymoon, having the DM take my character sheet away and not let me play Hilda for a while. On the bright side, Alistar was also gone, but I just wanted to play my fighter. For a time, I played a child sorcerer, because here's hoping they wouldn't try to pin a romance on a child. Eventually, I was given Hilda back. Big Sexy seemed satisfied and took the hint, having Alistar take care of something far away. Meanwhile, giants were invading Hilda's hometown. Finally, time to prove herself. So the party went to her town, armed to the bits, and Hilda took charge. She made good use of her giant slayer feet and slashed ankles. She kicked colossal ass and it was incredible. The day is saved. The people are saved. All is good. There was much rejoicing. The halfling people begin to erect a statue in the middle of town. Of Alistar. What? But he wasn't even here, I protested. Big Sexy smiled. Quote, "They know, but he's such a figure of goodness that they associate this liberation with him. But don't worry, you'll always be known as his wife." Oh my god, seriously, what a dick. This DM is a real asshole. Changed my mind. That was the defining moment where all joy had been sucked out. It was abundantly clear my feelings weren't taken into account. My character was just something he wanted to fix and break under his ego. I was stuck with a group that left me hungry, frustrated, and miserable. There is a happy ending to this, if you're petty like me. Around this time, I met my now fiancé. He asked me on a date for Friday night, which was when we played D&D. I was pretty burned out, and man was this guy cute. So I said yes. I told Big Sexy on Monday that I had plans Friday, so he would have to find somewhere else to play that week. Went on the date, had a great time. Next Monday rolls around, and I asked Big Sexy how the game went. Quote, "Terrible. We had to play at the school. We didn't have anything to eat. We had to be quiet. Clearly you don't care about the game at all. We don't want you around anymore. Consider yourself booted." And like that, I was out. According to Mitch, who I had asked about the game afterwards, the game only lasted one session after getting rid of me. They all burned out and never spoke to each other again. Meanwhile, I never let any of this kind of shit happen in current games. My current group, including my fiancé and Barbarian, has been playing ever since, and we've been having a wonderful time. TLDR, party eats all the food, openly looks at porn during the game, DM allows child sex slavery under the banner of lawful good, DM bullies a player for playing an orc, puts in an all-powerful DMPC to be the star of the show, and forces my lesbian character to marry him. Wow, it almost sounds like the DM didn't appreciate everything OP did when hosting games until it wasn't there. But instead of realizing this, he doubles down on his dickheadedness and kicks out OP? Thankfully, it sounds like OP didn't mind much at this point. I honestly don't know how OP, or any of their other players for that matter, put up with that DM for so long. He definitely sounds like he could be the final boss of the stereotypical neckbeards. It's good to hear that OP had something good come from everything though. DMPCs can be a good thing when done right. In fact, in my first campaign that's still going, we have one that the players love, but only see every now and then, and is interwoven into the story that isn't overbearing. Though it definitely sounds like this DM wanted to self-insert, and for creepy reasons. Have you ever been in a game with a DMPC that was either good or bad? I'd love to hear about it in the comments. If you have a story that you would like this Doge to read on the channel, you can always post it in the comments, on the channel subreddit, or even just at me on Twitter. As always, I appreciate all of you, and remember, no D&D is better than bad D&D. Until next time.